Greetings and welcome to episode 21 of the Classical Guitar Composers Podcast. As always, I am your host, Chris Hales. Very excited to be bringing another episode of the show to you. It's the show where we get to hear original classical guitar music from around the world, sent in by listeners like you. And as I promised in the last episode, we're trying something new today, and man, I'm excited. So I'm going to get right into it. We've got a few things to cover. I absolutely have to talk about the sad passing of the legend Julian Bream, one of the greatest guitarists of all time. Just really sad, an amazing guitarist, and he was an old man, and it's not. At least he lived a nice full life. But I absolutely adore Julian Bream. We'll talk about that a little more in a minute. But regarding the new feature on the show, today is going to be my very first interview with one of our composers. So something I'd like to start doing is having a conversation with some of our contributors to the show and getting to know some of you a little better. It's not something we're going to be doing every episode. The format of the show is not changing, but every now and then I would like to splash in an episode like this. I think you will all enjoy it. I certainly have. And so I got to have a conversation with Scott Niebauer. Scott Niebauer, as I'm sure most of you know, has been featured on the show a couple of times and has been a frequent email contributor as well as compositions. And Scott, as I pointed out a long time ago, in a way, revitalized this show at a time where I really was truly ready to give up. And Scott sent in some music along with a very nice email, and from there the show has really been going pretty strong after it had really been a few months. So additionally, I just know that Scott and I share some similar interests, and I've always enjoyed his sense of humor. And I wanted to actually meet him. So I had a conversation with Scott and absolutely enjoyed it. We had some technical difficulties, so I'm going to tell you what happened. About halfway through the interview, the internet in Scott's town just completely went out, and we weren't able to finish. So we came back the next day and tried to pick up at least where we had left off. So we actually did this over 2 days. So what you'll hear is the first part of the interview, and then there'll be an ad break, and then when we come back from that, that's picking up the interview the next day. And, I'll tell you a little not so secret, but sometimes I record the show over the course of a weekend. Most of the time, I like to sit down and just do it all at once, but there are times where you just take it a little bit at a time, so no big deal. But yeah, I really appreciate Scott coming on. And so here's the deal. If you would like to be on the show that way, if you'd like to come on and have a conversation with me, I'd love it. This is open to contributors of the show, those of you who have already contributed. If you contribute in the future, then I'd like to have that conversation as well in the future. But I'd like to do it after we've heard from you. I want it to be an additional thing to us hearing your music. And I don't know what the interest is going to be. It's certainly not something I want to do every episode, like I said, but I'm thinking maybe a couple of times a year. So I will give preference to the more frequent contributors of the show. But there's many of you I'd really like to just meet and have a conversation with. Martin, I'd certainly like to talk to you. I'd love to make that happen if you're interested. Lance, there's really any of you, if you have contributed to this show and would like to come on and talk a little more about composition and whatever else you want to get into. Something I'd like to do. So we're going to get right into it. I'm not going to do a big long monologue. That's it. But I do have an email, and then we, of course, need to talk a little bit about Julian. So I have an email from our friend Martin Slater, and this is from earlier this week, so this is before Julian Bream had passed. I'll just point that out. Martin writes, "Hello, Chris. Here we go again. I think I heard you cast doubt on there ever having been a Villa-Lobos Prelude number 6. Well, I think Mr. Bream was pretty sure that there had been one because he actually went to the trouble of playing them in a different order to that published. To quote from the notes in his LP of 1972, originally, Villa-Lobos wrote 6 preludes during 1939 to 1940, but one of them became mislaid. In order to improve the impact in playing the 5 together, Julian Bream has rearranged the published order. This is numbers 1, 5, 3, 4, and 2. Further, Wikipedia states that these preludes were dedicated to his wife, Arminda Neves de Almeida, a.k.a. Mindina, whom Bream certainly met in 1976, admittedly 4 years after his recording, to receive the Villa-Lobos gold medal. She must certainly have known the truth." So, yes, that's interesting, Martin. I forgot that Julian Bream played those out of order, but I did know that at one point. Martin continues, "As a result of this, I got to thinking of my personal experiences of Julian Bream. I've twice got his autograph, but the most significant meeting was after he'd performed a very local and intimate charitable concert in the aid of the Salisbury Cathedral Spire Fund in 1985. You may have heard of Salisbury, as it was where Russian agents poisoned Sergei Skripal and his daughter, causing an international incident in 2018. After the concert, which I attended with my father, we managed to corner him on his way out. Yes, just me, my father, and Julian. One of my objectives on this unique occasion was to get my copy of his Life on the Road signed, but also in the vain attempt to interest him in some of my music. For this attempt, I now eternally regret that I presented him with a copy of my sonata for guitar. No, I have not mentioned that before," he writes. "I really wish I had given him my studies, as I now think, 35 years later, that they may have had a better chance of getting his serious attention. Needless to say, my sonata is not actually lost, but somewhere hidden in the loft of my house, but the themes still resound in my head. Such things only happen once in a lifetime, although I did nearly have the opportunity to meet Segovia after a concert at the Barbican in London, but I was too timid to make the attempt." Yeah, I'd be afraid to meet Segovia too, had we crossed lifetimes. But yeah, I think I especially because I haven't always had the nicest things to say about him. Yeah, I'd find him a very intimidating man. Anyway, Martin continues, "Music itself is still in me, but most of my energies in the last 18 years have been spent for my daughter, who plays both piano and cello to grades 7 and 5, respectively. As she is even better at art than music, it has been a constant battle to get her to practice enough, which she has been doing since the age of 7. She is off to Portsmouth University in October to study fashion and design, so along with you getting me going again, I look forward to more time for my own music making and guitar playing, my personal renaissance." And on the final comical comment, the only one I ever read was called The Eagle, which featured a hero called Dan Dare and an evil green alien called the Mekon, which flew around on its little flying saucer. I even wrote a short sci-fi story called The Cloud, I was still a teenager then, which I submitted to a magazine, which promptly returned it, saying the magazine was about to fold. Admittedly, this was not a rejection, but I still destroyed it in a fit of disappointment. I can actually remember the plot, so maybe one day I will try to rewrite it. Martin. And Martin included some pictures for me, and I'm gonna post a bit on the website. You can see Martin's autograph from Julian Bream. And like I said, this came before the tragic news of Julian's passing. And I wrote back to Martin that I love the idea of his piece just sitting around like like Julian just threw it in a pile, and somewhere there's like this stack of sheet music in Julian's house, and like it may go be auctioned off as his collection, as part of his collection one day after he passes. And Martin wrote back to me. He said, "Chris, it's strange, but I always imagined he binned it, which is why I hid it away. I have now commenced an exhausting research of my loft, which has so far produced a copy of the first page. Your idea that it still exists in his portfolio gave me an angle I had not considered and a peculiar sense of anticipation, which will only be realized on the much sadder occasion of his passing." And, of course, our conversation could not been more ill-timed. This was on Tuesday. I believe the news of his passing came out yesterday, Friday. So I guess it's such an amazing story that you gave Julian a copy of your sonata and cornered him. I hope that is somewhere in that collection, Martin. I don't want to go on too long about Julian Bream. I'll say that his film Guitarra is a must-see for all classical guitarists. It's incredible. It's completely focused on the music of Spain. And Julian Bream is just, he had relentless energy in pursuing the classical guitar. I think that we really owe him so much. He did so much for the classical guitar, between commissioning pieces, transcribing pieces, and just making it, really adding to Segovia's efforts of making it a truly respected classical instrument. And he was an incredible player, and he had interesting technique. In some ways he had some bad technique, which he was fully aware of, but it didn't matter for that guy, man. And he also played so many versions of the guitar. He could play the lute very well, the vihuela, I just feel that he was relentless in his pursuits. And I love his recordings with John Williams. Julian Bream, I never liked the piece. There's the 3 Spanish pieces by Rodrigo, and that first one that most people seem to just play the first one that play it, but I never liked it until I heard Julian Bream play it, and he completely changed my mind about that piece, so much so that I ordered the sheet music and started working on it, because he had such a way of bringing out the different parts, and he was an extremely colorful player. I've never met anyone who didn't love Julian Bream, at least that I've talked to about it. But I believe in some of the professional circles, there are those who were not a fan necessarily of the way he played. He was very colorful with his playing. Someone told me that Manuel Barrueco told them he was not a Julian Bream fan, and could be true. He's certainly a different player than Manuel, but Manuel did post a very nice thing about him, I think on his Facebook or Twitter or something. I don't think anyone, whether you liked his playing or not, I don't believe there's anyone who doesn't just hold a lot of respect for Julian Bream. And one other piece that really stands out by Julian Bream to me is the Grand Sonata by Paganini. I've never heard anyone play it like Julian Bream. I like the Grand Sonata. I really like Paganini a lot, but I don't really care to hear any other version than Julian Bream's. I wish Julian had published his transcription because it's so good. It is by far the best version of that piece. And I knew someone who attempted to transcribe it himself, transcribe Julian's from the recording, but it was just, it's a lot of work. And I don't know if he ever finished it, but he was just an absolute amazing performer. I wish I had been able to see him. That's really cool, Martin, that you saw him and met him, and that's a really, really neat thing. So with that, we're going to move on to the Scott Niebauer interview. And then we're going to hear a piece by, I don't want this to get lost in this massive episode, a piece by Paul Horn. And I believe Paul just sent us a single work, so we'll hear that after the Scott interview. And one other thing, there's a lot of like weird little audio artifacting going on in this interview. I think the service I used, it may not be the most clean as far as like the recording it produced, but it allowed us to do this. It's also possible that my mic is going dead on me. There's like my mic kept cutting out, which I didn't notice during the time, so I don't know if it was from the service we were using or if it's because my daughter dropped it the other day, knocked it off the shelf. So but there's some other like weird pops and stuff going on, but in spite of that, I think Scott and I had a really great conversation. So with that, I'm going to shut up. Here it is, and then we will hear some music. All right, well, Scott, first of all, I just wanted to tell you I'm really excited to actually talk to you. I feel like you're probably as good a friend as I have, having never met them.
Crazy. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it's great to talk to you. I want to just also ask you a couple of questions regarding composition. I was curious when you started composing. Did you begin with classical guitar, or were you more of like a, whatever you'd call it, a rock guitarist, or how did you come to the classical guitar? And I guess the next part would be, at what point did you start composing as well?
All right. Yeah. Great question. Excuse me. Well, I had a friend, grew up in a small town in New York State, and had a friend who at a very young age got a drum set. And he had some older brothers that had like beat up electric guitars laying around. And I went over there one time and he was playing drums, and his brother was playing one of these guitars that had like 2 or 3 strings on it, just playing like the simplest thing. And I just saw him play that guitar, and just something clicked, and I was like, wow, I was mesmerized, and I wanted to play guitar, and I didn't care. Probably I wanted electric guitar more, but my first guitar, I got a toy guitar from Toys R Us or something. And I have a lot of older brothers and sisters, and I had found like a chord book, like from, like the 1960s kind of chord book. Uh-huh. I got my little toy guitar, and I was trying to make these shapes, and I just couldn't be dissuaded, and eventually my dad bought me my first steel string acoustic guitar, and
so when you were learning those chord shapes, was the guitar in tune?
No, I'm sure it was. I didn't even think it was playable. I was just trying to make these shapes, and I remember one time I broke a string on my guitar, and I used a yo-yo string for it. Just so I could get by, like I had to play guitar.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and then
I asked that because
yeah,
I asked that because my dad gave me his electric when I was a kid. He didn't play anymore, but he had this Fender Mustang, and the thing wasn't in tune at all.
Right.
And I would like look at like posters of, say, a guitarist. I'd see like a poster of Joe Perry,
right, and
I would try to match what shape he was making.
Oh, good idea.
Like with his finger. He's probably in the middle of a solo, but and I like,
yeah,
find my way on the fretboard. But then, of course, I didn't even know a guitar had to be tuned. Of
course, yeah. And that's like one of the most challenging parts of like teaching someone to play guitar.
It is.
Yeah, that's a good idea though. Looking at the shapes, I would have never thought to do that. And even now, that's how I approach some of my compositions. Just pick a crazy hand shape and then hear what comes out.
Yeah, yeah, that can be fun. It's like, what have I not done yet? What? what could I possibly stack up here that
Right.
I
Right.
haven't done? Oh, that's cool.
So
Actually, that
yeah. Go
sorry,
ahead.
I was just saying the first time I learned it, I had somebody show me. He was sitting there playing something on an electric, and I asked him to show me how to do it, and I could, I picked it up fairly quickly. At least I thought I did. But I ran home, and I was excited to show my mom, and I pulled that Fender Mustang out and went to play it for her. And of course, the guitar wasn't in tune, so it sounded nothing like it had at his house. That's
Yeah. And she's like, "That's very good. That's very nice, dear."
I think that's about when she was like, "It's time for lessons if you really want to do this." So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, we also had an old trumpet in the attic, and my dad was like, "Well, if you want to play music, take this trumpet and go play in high school band or school band." So I did that. Never got along with the trumpet very well, but my band teacher there in high school was very influential, and he said, "Well, if you want to play guitar, you should take up classical guitar." And
Oh, yeah.
and my brother, he said, my brother-in-law happens to teach classical guitar. So I got a classical guitar and started taking lessons. So it was pretty shortly after I started guitar that I started classical. So I also had electric guitar at the time. I guess I got my electric guitar first, and I was doing the band with my drummer buddy, but I was also practicing classical guitar at the same time. So very thankful for that, for supportive parents and supportive band teacher. Yeah.
Right on. Yeah, so you kind of started approaching classical fairly young then. Young in guitar wise.
Right, yeah. I'd probably been playing electric guitar like a year before I started playing classical.
Yeah.
And just
So have you played all this time classical?
Yeah, I've kept up both sides, electric guitar and classical guitar.
Nice.
And singing and songwriting. So some of my first compositions when I got that guitar were just, I would write my own songs just using the E minor chord and the A, what do you call that chord? The A with the open B in it.
Oh, yeah, like the A2.
sus2. Yeah, that's my favorite guitar chord right there.
That is a great chord.
That's, just those two chords and whatever lyrics I thought of. That was it.
Right on. I was just I was looking through your score for the descriptive pieces, which we featured last time. We did you on the show, and we've talked about this, but it's something I really like about your music, and I hear this in that new one you sent me too. That your music is very written to the guitar. I'm wondering, how much when you're composing, are you really trying to write more idiomatically, or maybe you're not thinking about it? I'm just curious. I often will find myself like trying to force something I'm wanting onto the guitar, and then I find it's easier if I just let the guitar do its thing, and
I think that is mostly it. I'll just pick up the guitar and, like I said, a lot of times just, what does it sound like if I put my fingers here?
Nice. Yeah.
And instead of, I have this wonderful melody in my head that I can't get rid of. I wish it was more of that, or sitting down and saying, I'm going to do a composition that does this, I'm just like, man, I got 15 minutes. I'm going to pick up the guitar, pick up my pencil, see if I can get anything that sounds cool.
Right on.
Yeah. So, despite having studied music composition in college, I just wanted to write guitar music. I didn't want to write for woodwind quintet. Although I do love that ensemble. I love the sound of that ensemble.
Yeah.
But the first thing that your composition teacher wants you to do is piano and voice. So I did some of that. But I just always wanted to write for guitar, and now that's all I do.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah. Yeah. What are you going to do? I mean, it's just me.
Well, it's more fun. Yeah, exactly. It's a lot more satisfying when you can play what you wrote. And when I started studying composition, I was writing for all kinds of like little ensembles.
Right.
And I was writing a lot of keyboard music that I couldn't really play, and I can kind of hack my way on a keyboard, but not really.
Right. Yeah.
And at some point I want to just only write guitar music personally.
Yeah, and I guess probably my teachers thought, well, that's not going to be the way that you grow and learn and expand your horizons and all that kind of stuff. So I can understand. I can understand why they didn't want me to just write guitar music.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, it definitely doesn't hurt, but I would say there's a challenge to writing guitar music.
Yeah, I mean,
I think it's a hard instrument to write for.
That's what I've heard. Non-guitarists that attempt to compose music for guitar struggle with it, I guess, which is hard to understand because that's all we know. It's there's 5 different places you can play the same note, or how many? 3 different places, True.
I'll tell you, I've come across parts that were written, like ensemble things, where the composer really did not know the guitar very well, and it's I mean, they'll write stuff that's not very possible or practical, and
Right.
Have you played much of like the 20th century stuff written for Segovia that's like, that a lot of these non-guitarists were writing for him, but then he was trying to help them shape it to the guitar?
Not a whole lot. To me, a little bit of the Albanese and Toroba. I was playing that piece that's called Turregano. Looks like it should be Turregano.
I love that one.
Yeah, that's a cool piece. Yeah, so I don't know how much of that is Segovia's influence or what.
Well, I think there had to have been some understanding from Toroba. That's one of my favorites, actually. I've got notes on what Segovia changed from the original.
Right.
And it's pretty minimal. So he probably helped him along, but I mean, I think that's such a cool piece. I like all those castles of Spain.
Yes. Yeah, those are very nice too.
Are you a big classical fan in general, or somewhat? Like, do you have a favorite composer?
Yeah, I guess I was, influenced more by popular music, and I got into classical music more when I was in college. Definitely like Debussy, Ravel, Stravinsky. Those spoke to me a lot. Yeah. But honestly, I don't listen to as much classical music as I ought to. But
so they say.
So they say. I mean, there's just so much more, beauty and so much more to appreciate, and in classical music, because there's so much more going on, But somehow we just like what we like, Like I was gonna say, like, my first influence, I saw this movie. I don't know if you remember this television channel. Is it USA Up All Night on early cable TV? Yeah. There's this movie called Another State of Mind that followed the band Social Distortion and Youth Brigade. And that was a huge influence on me. There's this scene where Mike Ness, the singer from Social Distortion, is working out this new song, and he's playing it on acoustic guitar. And then later on, they show him playing it on electric guitar with distortion, just like in his little practice room or something.
Yeah.
And that just really took me. So then I read, well, the Sex Pistols, and like how these punks, they don't even tune their guitars and everything. So right. I got that Sex Pistol album, and I was like, it sounded like very slick production, and everything was really in tune to me. But there's this album that's called the mini album of Sex Pistols. It's hard to find. It's just like a little EP. And they have this version of this song called Satellite. And it starts off with ba 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 ba, and then everything fades out, and then you just hear this electric distorted guitar come in and go something about that sound. It's just that sound right there.
Just grabbed you.
It just grabbed me. I don't know what it is. And then I got into Sonic Youth a lot. There's this other show called Snub TV on the same channel that would play like in the cutting edge happy hour, would play like, I don't know, alternative music, I guess you call it.
Uh-huh.
I got into Sonic Youth quite a bit. And so that's some of the earliest stuff that I got into. The guitarist I really like, I really like mellow kind of stuff too. Like there's this guitarist, Steve Tibbetts, 2 B's, 2 T's. His stuff is just really, really nice. Like a lot with silences and percussion. And he has this one album, I think it's Big Map Idea, where there's tabla in there. So like tabla and acoustic guitar, just such a nice sound. And I've found this composer who's named Lauge. I don't know how you pronounce it, Lauge. He has this stuff that's just very, I guess, New Age, you might say. I was influenced a little bit by New Age. But Leo Brouwer,
Mm-hmm.
Leo Brouwer is tops. I did his studies. I still love those studies. And the Eternal Spiral, that piece just really grabs me.
Right on. I have not gotten into Brouwer, but I do enjoy it. But a lot of what I've heard about him is that his stuff is very playable and kind of fun to play.
Yeah,
because it just fits the guitar so well.
Yes, it's great. And he did try to use some influences of like popular music, like Edward Van Halen kind of inspired things in some of his compositions. I had a great opportunity to meet Brouwer last year in March. I think I went to the Buffalo State, did a little Brouwer in Buffalo festival. I went and played some Decameron Negro for him. Just incredible experience, incredible man. So that was like, I had him sign my copies of the studies. So if I have a musical hero, that would be Leo Brouwer, definitely. Another composer.
That is that's you just dropped an incredible thing there. So wait,
I know.
How did it go? Did you play well for him?
Yeah. You always want to do better, don't you? But
yeah.
I mean, it's just because I was coming at it, like I haven't been practicing that heavily, and doing other things and working, and I'm like, here's this Brouwer thing, and I'm like, I'm gonna go to it, and
sign me up.
Like I started staying up till midnight trying to practice every night so I could be ready, and I was as ready as I could be at that point. So
that's really cool.
Yeah. So
did you say that was up in Buffalo?
Yes. Yeah. Buffalo State University there. They have a really great guitar program.
Okay. Now, are you still in Florida?
I'm in Florida. Yeah. Near Daytona Beach area.
So did you just travel up there for that?
Yeah. Just sort of on a whim, and I'm going to do it. I mean,
right on.
Nobody said anything about like, well, you're not a student here or anything, are you? They just welcomed me with open arms. So just goes to show you can do it if you want to.
Man, that's awesome.
For what it's worth, it's just an experience I had. Also, another piece I love, Sunburst by Andrew York. You know that piece?
I do. That's a great piece.
So I had
yes.
Yes.
I was to say I worked on it for a while, but I got sick of that tuning. I struggle with alternate tunings, man.
Yeah, they're confusing.
But that is such a great piece.
I know you've mentioned that Kuyan Baba piece before. The king of alternate tunings.
That one's a real inconvenient thing. But once you get there, it's
I love the sound of it. I'd like to tackle that one sometimes. Another of my favorite composers, Roland Dyens. Not sure how you pronounce his name either. Dyens. Sadly, he just...
I think my teacher always called him Dyens.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's... Yeah, as you're saying, he's passed.
Incredible music. I really love his compositions. And Sergio Assad, some of his compositions, Aquarelle, I played that a little bit. There's just some music that's just like, wow, it'll grab you, or it'll grab me, and I don't know why or what it is or what those composers have done. My only guess is that they work on their music 16 hours a day. Pat Metheny. Metheny is another big one. Where I read, that's he would practice 16 hours a day, and so. I guess that shows,
That's true. I like to think that I at least used to practice a lot. Because I will say this, when my parents put me in guitar lessons, they never had to tell me to go practice.
Right.
Like, you could not keep the guitar out of my hands.
Right.
And so when I was teaching, I'm not really teaching anymore, but I didn't really know what to say to parents when they'd say, how do I get my kid to practice? I don't know.
Yeah, if they don't want to practice, what are they doing? Yeah, that's frustrating because you say you can't just go to your guitar lesson. What? You're not gonna.
Yeah, there's no greater pleasure than practicing guitar. I don't know. What do you mean they're not practicing?
Yeah, I guess, but
some of these guys, I don't know. I imagine it's the same thing with composition. If you're composing every single day, you're gonna.
Yes. My composition teacher in college, in my undergrad, he used to say things. He would say things like, "You have to get it to where it's like a tap, like a water faucet, and it's just right there on the surface." And he would talk about how like little kids love to go and play. It's like that's what it has to be for composing. You just, and when you get into it, when you're doing it all the time, it is like that. You build it up, but it takes that time and persistence to get to that point where it's like a water fountain or a faucet rather.
Right.
Fire hydrant, whatever it is for you.
For some people.
Yeah, and there's so many other things that go on in your life, you got to get your car fixed and you got to mow the lawn and,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. It's easy to get.
Sprinklers is my current battle.
So that stuff is fun too, but it's like,
Yeah.
I'd rather be composing. I need to get that bumper sticker.
That's good. Yeah, I find it takes me a while to find the groove, but then if I will stick with it long enough,
right,
I have a hard time turning it off. I'm like sitting here thinking about my music in the store or wherever, and that's usually when I've actually finished something. Is when it becomes like an obsession.
Mm-hmm.
But it takes a while for me to get there.
Right.
I guess it's often like, I love to play the guitar. I don't necessarily always want to do my scales.
Sure.
But if I do my scale routine, by the end of it, I'm having a blast just doing scales because,
they can be quite fun. Yes.
Yeah. But, that initial beginning, I don't know, everyone's got their own scale routine, but if I do mine fully, it takes like 45 minutes, which is just absurd because I don't practice for 4 hours a day anymore.
Right.
I used to. So,
right.
But I don't really know how to bring down that scale routine because I find it's just too helpful to not use it. Anyway.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
What else?
Well, I was going to ask you about current projects, but you sent me a brand new thing.
Yeah.
You were saying you called it a demo, so that's why I was asking if there was if you were planning on doing another recording. But no, I did think it sounded great. I was surprised you did that with just a phone.
Yeah, just GarageBand on my iPhone. That's pretty good results. I mean, especially for solo classical guitar, it kind of seems like it can only sound so good, even with really high quality microphones and high quality studio and all that. It's not really for my ear, it's not that much different from a decent GarageBand recording. But that just shows that I don't have good ears, probably.
I'm sure your ears are fine. I think it's
Thank you.
I think it's the excitement of neat microphones and preamps and boards with lots of lights on them. There's an allure to that.
Yeah. And a nice room, yeah. But of course, high quality classical guitar makes a difference too. So that's something that I got to step up my game on too. I just have what am I recording with? It's Alvarez Yairi.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I know a nicer guitar is going to give you a lot nicer sound, and I can definitely hear that. You can definitely hear it just when you play the low E on one of these, $8,000, $10,000 guitars. Yeah, there's a difference, a big difference.
Hey, like me, are you addicted to sheet music? Then let me tell you about Encoda. Encoda is an app that lets you practice, play, and perform your sheet music. It is a streaming service similar to Netflix and Spotify with tens of thousands of titles. That's millions of pages of sheet music available instantly at your fingertips. Subscribers have access to the finest editions from Boozy and Hawkes, Baron Reiter, Chester, Novello, and many, many more. And they have received praise from Sir Simon Rattle and Joyce D. Donato. And if you're not sure, you can sign up for a free trial. Download Encoda from your app store today. That's Encoda, Nkoda. And be sure to let them know that the Classical Guitar Composers Podcast sent you.